Hello everyone, welcome to Revenge with Harlan, where we listen and share thought-provoking stories. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a new episode. And now, let's get started. The first lie wore the perfume of peppermint. Not tonight, Ethan. I've got a headache. 4 small words, sugar-coated and cool as the mint on her breath. And suddenly, our bedroom turned into a museum. Everything familiar, but glassed off, not to be touched. It wasn't the first time she'd said it. By then, it had been nearly 4 months of that same gentle refusal. 4 months of a light switched off at the exact hour the house settled, and the crickets began their modest aria. 4 months of the guest room door clicking shut like a heartbeat lost. My name is Ethan Ward, 35, shift supervisor at Hartley Design and Fabrication, on the south side of Phoenix, Arizona. I like my coffee too strong, and my routine simple. My wife, Amelia, used to laugh at me for it. When we married 6 years ago under the sun-blanched stones of St. Andrews, she pressed my hand and promised we'd turn our patterns into a home. We did. For a while. That night, I stood in the doorframe while Amelia brushed her hair at the vanity. The lamp threw a halo over her shoulder and left her face half in shade. In the mirror, she did everything but meet my eyes. "Amelia," I said, voice slow, careful, like carrying a glass through a dark room. "We need to talk." "About what?" Her brush clinked against the wood. Her hand trembled and then stilled. She turned, gave me that practiced smile that didn't crease the skin near her eyes. "Nothing is happening, Ethan. I'm just tired." 4 months tired? I asked. I tried to say it light. A tease. It sounded like a plea. She smiled again, smaller. "Work's been a lot." Work meant Glenmont Electric, downtown. Same desk, same hours. Same receptionist badge for the past 2 years. Same story she always told. But lately, the story had rewritten itself. Late evenings, shirts I didn't recognize, new shoes we never budgeted for, a perfume that wasn't hers, or at least wasn't ours, because the version of her that wore it did not come home to me. "I made an appointment," she added quickly, "with Dr. Harper next week. Routine labs. Maybe I need iron or vitamin D." The way she said it had the polish of something rehearsed. I nodded. I loved her enough to nod. After she fell asleep, I lay awake, counting the breath between us. There was a time she talked in her sleep. Trivia of dreams, grocery lists, jokes overheard and smuggled into midnight. I realized I hadn't heard her murmur in months. Silence, when you are married, takes on its own sound. A hush that needs every corner of the room, holds the pictures on the walls, sits down on the edge of the bed with a weight. The next morning at 6:15, not her hour, never her hour, I found her hunched over the bathroom sink. The tap ran at a thin line. She didn't hear me at first. Then she straightened, wiping her mouth, and forced another small smile. "Something I ate," she said. "That Mongolian place. You know how they drown everything in oil." We'd eaten the same dish. I felt fine. She was already dressed for work. Navy blouse I'd never seen. A skirt with a tag thread still clinging. "I need to leave early," she said. "Big client meeting. Could run long." "Client?" I asked. Glenmont Electric didn't do clients. Not like that. Their biggest visitor last year was a soda distributor who left branded keychains. She kissed my cheek, careful to turn her face so I couldn't smell her breath. Then she was gone. The house held its breath for a long time after the door closed. In the kitchen, I found my World's Most Patient Man mug, the one she'd given me on our 2nd anniversary, sitting upside down on the drying rack. She'd scribbled the words with a ceramic pen, drawing a little lightning bolt under "patient" that we'd laughed about for a week. I picked it up and felt how cold it had grown. Curiosity is a soft-footed animal. It doesn't crash through your life with teeth bared. It pads along, noses at doors, curls up by your feet until you reach down to touch it. So I watched. Little things at first. Her phone lived face down on the table, then migrated to her coat pocket even inside the house. Her schedule warped. Mondays and Thursdays suddenly bloomed into late nights. When she came home, her fragrance, Amelia's light citrus, was overlaid with something amber and unfamiliar, a cologne that clung to the ends of her hair. When I asked casually about the smell, she said the elevator had broken, and she'd had to share a ride with Derek from shipping. Glenmont Electric doesn't have a shipping department. The lie sat between our plates like a new place setting. When we stop trusting the obvious, we start listening to the quiet. I listened carefully. 2 weeks later, I was in the closet pulling down our folder of appliance warranties. The refrigerator had started hiccuping, when a slip of paper fell from behind the envelope. It had been tucked deep, folded down to the size of a thumbnail. In the pool of afternoon light, I smoothed it open. Desert Family Clinic, Phoenix date, 8 weeks before. Line items, consultation, serum HCG, follow-up. Handwritten, positive. The words sat there, clinical and clean. Positive. My brain did the math even as part of me begged it not to. 4 months of distance, 8 weeks since that appointment. A calendar that did not bend to wishful thinking. Everything held still. The air, the dust in the air, the memory of last winter's light on the back fence. In my hands, the receipt trembled once, and then went steady. I put it back exactly the way I found it. That evening, Amelia brought home stir-fry and eased into conversation like it was a sweater she wasn't sure still fit. "How was your day?" she asked. "Steady," I said. "We installed new safety shields on the cutters. Sam, remember Sam? Almost took off a thumbnail last week." "Sam with the freckles," she said, smiling automatically like a polite neighbor. Then, after a beat, "Dr. Harper thinks I might be low on iron. She'll confirm next week." I nodded. I was polite too. That night, she slid into our bed for the first time in weeks, lay with her back to me but closer than she had allowed in a long time. When I rested my hand near her waist, she placed her palm flat on her own stomach, a quiet guarding. In the dark, I listened to us not speaking. Curiosity shifted into tenderness that hurt. Because love, real love, doesn't just cling to what it already knows, it aches to understand. I wanted to understand. The next morning, I took a half day and drove into the slow burn of downtown. Up 3 floors in an old building with cracked tile, a brass plate read, Eleanor Briggs, Family Law. She was in her late 50s, silver hair coiled neatly, eyes that had seen worse than this and still carried a softness in them. "Tell me what you know," she said. I told her what I suspected and what I could prove. I kept my voice even. She didn't interrupt. "Do you want to save your marriage?" she asked finally. I swallowed. "I want the truth, whatever it costs." "Then get the truth," she said gently, "but do it in a way that honors the man you are. That matters later." She explained my options. Non-invasive prenatal paternity testing, possible as early as 10 weeks with the mother's cooperation. Otherwise, testing at birth, with my legal right as a husband to request it. She explained how to document, how to stay careful, how to keep compassion even as I gathered facts. Because compassion, she said, will keep you from hating what you used to love. Compassion. I wrote it down like a number I couldn't forget. When I left, the sun had climbed. The desert puts a clarity into noon that feels like judgment. I crossed the street into a coffee shop and stared at my reflection in the window while the barista called out drinks. I didn't recognize the set of my mouth. I looked like a man already wearing a verdict. I decided I would not rush to confrontation. Love doesn't mean letting yourself be fooled. It means choosing not to break things that don't need to be broken in the act of finding out. So I planned, and I kept tenderness at the center of the plan. I don't mean softness. I mean the refusal to dehumanize the person across from you, even when the ground under you shifts. I spoke to Mason Hale, a private investigator with a voice like gravel and a surprising delicacy. "You don't want to ruin her life," he said after I explained. "You want to know your own." He offered a small GPS tag. He made a list: dates, places, a paper trail that belonged to the facts, not the resentment. For 2 weeks, I let the small device draw a map I didn't want. The blue line threaded across Phoenix to a neighborhood in Tempe, cul-de-sacs like stitches, a low-slung ranch house on Sycamore Lane where the porch light stayed broken. 3 Thursday evenings in a row, Amelia's car idled under the jacaranda tree with the peeling bark. The first time I parked 2 blocks away and walked. The second time I stood across the street and watched a man with dark hair and an easy athletic build step out to her car and take her in with his eyes the way I used to. The third time, when he opened the door and held out his hand, she placed her palm inside his as if she recognized a home there. The pictures my phone took were plain. You could stitch a story to them in 1,000 ways, but they didn't need embroidery. They were enough. I asked Mason to run the name tied to the address. Nathan Cole, 37, former foreman at Morrison & Sons Construction, laid off 9 weeks earlier. No arrests. 2 police calls for domestic disturbances that didn't land in court. Payments in arrears to a previous partner for a child in Flagstaff. A mortgage teetering. I read the printouts at our kitchen table with my hand steady and my heart loud. None of it excused anything. None of it made me hate Amelia. In a way that stung my eyes, it made me worry for her. The following Saturday, Amelia suggested dinner at Olivetto's, where we'd ordered our first bottle of red as a married couple, and startled the waiter by asking for a second. She wore a pale blue dress with a neckline that made me remember 10 different summers. "I have good news," she said, fingers tracing the rim of the water glass. "Tell me," I said. It didn't sound bitter to my own ears. I sounded tired. I hoped she heard tenderness anyway. She exhaled. "Ethan, we're going to have a baby." I let my face hold the surprise I had practiced in the mirror. Then I let it warm, not because I wanted to lie, but because a child, any child, deserved a moment that wasn't a battlefield. Compassion, I reminded myself. "When?" I asked. "How far?" "About 8 weeks, Dr. Harper thinks," she said. "End of May for the due date." I lifted my glass of sparkling water. "To news you can't unlove," I said softly. For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Relief, or the terrible gratitude of being believed. I didn't want to take that from her. But I couldn't live under it like a roof either. I set the glass down, reached into my jacket, and placed a manila folder on the table. She stared, then reached slowly, drew out the stack. Photographs, printouts, the map of Sycamore Lane with our car marked 3 times, Mason's notes, Eleanor's card. At the bottom, a gently worded DNA consent form for non-invasive testing, signed by me and blank on her line. Her fingers shook. The paper knocked softly against the plate. "I loved you," she whispered, as if she'd already been sentenced. "I love you." "I know," I said, and I meant it in the messiest, hardest way a person can mean it. I did not ask how and why. Not yet. I'm asking for the truth. Everything else can lose. Her mouth opened, closed. She breathed. For a moment, she looked 12, open-faced, about to admit she'd broken a window. "I was afraid," she said. It came out without a fight, as if fear had been dragging her feet for months and was relieved to sit down. "Afraid you'd see me as a mistake you never should have made. Afraid of being ordinary forever. Afraid there was a version of me who would never be more than Amelia at the desk. I met Nathan at a supply pickup. He flirted. It felt like shaking off a coat. It felt like I could be new. She blinked, mouth twisting. And then I was late. I told myself I could make the math work. I told myself we'd put it in the past like a story we don't tell anymore. I told myself. She stopped. I told myself a lot of things. Fear writes clever scripts, I said. She made a small, broken sound. I didn't want to blow up everything. I thought if I kept breathing, the truth would rearrange itself. The waiter came and went, left the plates untouched. Outside, a couple laughed too loud. Inside, we sat with the truth, like a third person at the table, alive and staring. I'm not here to punish you, I said at last. I'm here to say we're not going to lie to this child or to each other. I tapped the consent form. If this baby is mine, we will know. If he isn't, we will know. Either way, we will be kind. Her eyes filled. Kind? Kind doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, I said. It means we refuse to make ourselves smaller than the truth. Back home, she slept in the guest room, and I lay awake, my palm over my chest, as if I could keep my heart from wandering out to search for who we used to be. I thought of what Eleanor had said, about honoring the man I was, about how that choice would matter later. I thought of Mason and his rough voice, saying he understood men who wanted to burn it all down, and how few of them were happy with the ash. The next day, Amelia signed the consent. I drove her to Dr. Quinn at Paternity Diagnostics of Arizona, where the nurse drew 2 vials of blood and handed me a sterile swab for my cheek. Results in 72 hours, they said, barring complications. I wondered when my life had learned to speak this way. We didn't talk much while we waited, but we cooked in the same kitchen and didn't hover around each other like ghosts. She cried twice, quietly, at the sink, back turned, and I folded the dish towels as if neat edges could hold something in place. Compassion isn't a word. It's small domestic verbs. On Wednesday, an email pinged. I read it at the counter, felt the world lean a fraction, and then find its footing. Non-paternity. Definitive. I called Eleanor. We go forward, she said, practical and warm like a good coat. We do it with grace. That will be your wealth when the rest has been divided. I didn't storm into rooms. The divorce papers had already been drafted. Amelia and I sat at the kitchen table, the one we'd built from reclaimed pine our second summer, and read the pages slowly. She signed where she was supposed to sign. Her shoulders shook once, sharply, like a bird trying to shiver off rain. I signed too. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. I'm sorry where I failed you too. She looked up, startled. It doesn't excuse what you did, I added. But there were days I came home and gave my best to the machines I'd managed all day, instead of the woman I had promised to love. There were ways I made you feel unseen, and when the mirror showed you a stranger, you went to someone who named you. I wish you had picked me to name you again. She made a sound like a laugh and a sob tripping over each other. I wish I had too. We didn't smash plates. We divided them. We didn't scorch earth. We measured it. She moved into a sublet on Papago Street, a studio with a window that saw more sky than wall. I kept the house on Maple Drive for a time. The roses she'd planted at the front had gone leggy, flopping over the brick like they were tired of their own sweetness. I pruned them hard, almost to sticks. It felt cruel. People warned me they might die. I let the warning sit. A month later, Nathan called. I didn't know, he said. She told me you were separated. It's done, either way, I said. He made a disappointed sound, like he'd ordered something and it had arrived smaller than he'd imagined. In late May, Amelia gave birth to a boy. In the hospital hallway, a nurse asked me to sign a form acknowledging the results already on file. I did. Nathan didn't come that day. There were reasons: job interviews, a truck that wouldn't start. I took a quiet seat on a plastic chair while Amelia slept, and the baby made small animal sounds. He was perfect. I won't pretend I didn't feel that. He was perfect, and none of this was his fault. Compassion bent me forward. I stood, walked to the bassinet, and placed a finger near his hand. He gripped it with a fierce, tiny strength. "You're safe," I said, because I wanted it to be true. Amelia stirred. "Ethan?" Her voice was a rasp of salt. "Thank you for coming." "You're not alone," I said. It didn't undo anything. It didn't try to. It just left a light on in a dark hall. The weeks arranged themselves. Nathan did what men like Nathan often do. He tried and failed, made promises that thinned in the sun. Amelia waited for money orders that didn't arrive, stood under a broken fan, and learned to time the baby's naps with the bus schedule. She called me once in the middle of a July heat wave, voice threadbare. "Just to hear someone breathe," she said. I breathed with her for 5 minutes, and then spent the next hour not telling her what to do. Advice is cheaper than presents. I was learning to offer the expensive thing. In August, I sold the house on Maple. The day I signed the papers, Mrs. Collier from 2 doors down pressed a Tupperware of lemon bars into my hands and said, "You did well by it, son." I nodded, throat thick. I moved to a smaller place in Scottsdale. 1 bedroom, 1 decent balcony. A view of Apollo Verde that went gold at dusk. I took evening classes at Phoenix Community College, welding certs with an eye on site manager. At Hartley, I stepped into a new title, floor manager, and the men slapped my back in the unspoken way men do when congratulations would show too much. I was grateful anyway. The roses? I drove by Maple once in September out of a longing that wasn't wise. The new owners had put up a different mailbox. The roses were wild with bloom, stunned color, fat blossoms, a forgiveness I hadn't earned. Sometimes cutting something back is the most tender way to keep it alive. Autumn in Phoenix is a rumor you can almost trust. The mornings cooled. At Olivetto's, the waiter who'd witnessed our unspooling brought me water on a slow night and told me he'd gotten engaged. "She's a 4th-grade teacher," he said. He looked lit from within. I wished him the grit to be gentle. One evening in October, my sister Lydia dragged me to a charity 5K hosted by her office. "I need someone to run slow with," she joked. I trotted past a table loaded with paper cups and almost missed the woman pouring them. She wore her hair in a tight bun and had a scar near her eyebrow like a comma. "Water?" she said, and then laughed when I grabbed it and splashed half of it onto my shirt. "First time hydrating?" Her name was Claire. She'd moved to Phoenix to take care of an aunt. Discovered the desert had a way of dumping you into yourself and leaving you there until you figured out where you wanted to walk next. We talked about small things, and then the big thing. Not with urgency, but with an honesty that didn't need ornaments. I told her I was learning that strength is sometimes not the choice to hold on, but the courage to let go without bitterness. She smiled, and it didn't look practiced. We went on 2 dates that month. On the second, she asked, "Do you still love Amelia?" I looked at the condensation on my glass. "I love the life we meant to make," I said. "And I love the man I'm becoming because I refuse to torch the ground while I left it." "That's an answer people don't always like," she said. "It's the only one I have that lets me sleep." We dated slowly, like 2 people learning a new language and agreeing not to laugh at the accents. I didn't post pictures. I didn't announce anything. I wanted a quiet that wasn't made of lies. Amelia called in November. He left, she said simply. Said he couldn't do this. Not the way it is. She didn't ask for money. She asked for the name of a daycare she'd heard my co-worker's wife used. I sent it. Later, I dropped a bag of diapers on her porch and a second-hand bouncer that squeaked when you touched it. She texted a thank you and a photo. The baby's feet in a flannel onesie, tiny and serious. "Why are you kind to me?" she asked over the phone one evening while the baby cooed. "Because cruelty would only make me smaller," I said. And because one day he'll ask about the beginning of his life, and I want the story to have as much gentleness as the truth allows. "I don't deserve it," she said. "Neither do I answered. "That's not why we give it." Winter arrived with its strange desert bite. Hartley switched to a holiday schedule. I volunteered for the shift no one wanted, and found I didn't actually mind the quiet of the floor when the rest of the city was glittering. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my small balcony with a mug of coffee and watched a handful of fireworks stitch color into the sky. My phone buzzed. "Claire, I'm grateful for the year that taught you how to carry your heart." "Happy almost," I typed back. "Happy almost." I thought of the word that had carried me, compassion, and realized it had fleshed itself into habits, into a backbone. In February, Amelia asked if I could take the baby for an afternoon while she stood in line for a state assistance appointment. I said yes. I walked the boy, Oliver, around the park until he slept against my chest, in a carrier that squeaked faintly at each step. An older man at a bench said, "First time?" I nodded, smiling without explaining anything. No one needs the footnotes on love. I don't know what future Amelia and I will call each other in. Friends, maybe. Or simply people who once stood in front of the same altar and promised the right things, and then tripped over their own fear. She's taking online classes now, 2 at a time, something to do with records management. She texts me about exam dates the way you might text a weather report. I text back confetti emojis, like I'm a teenager, and she sends a picture of Oliver in a hat with ears. Eleanor sends a holiday card that says, in a tidy hand, "Grace is the architecture of recovery." I prop it on the mantle I said I didn't need, and then was glad I had. I still drive down Sycamore Lane sometimes, not to look for Nathan, not to inventory his choices, but to remind myself that the door to that house was never mine to open. The jacaranda finally dropped what was left of its purple in a dry gasp. Someone hung a new porch light. It glows every evening, ordinary and tender, as if to say, a house can be many stories in one lifetime. If you're waiting for me to say I forgave everything, and the skies parted and a song played, no. Recovery is a long field, and you walk it with good shoes and enough water and the occasional ache. But the ache has meaning, and that is the difference between pain that poisons and pain that instructs. On a Sunday in late spring, nearly a year after the first peppermint lie, I carried a tray of lemonade into Lydia's backyard, where a half-dozen kids were inventing a game with rules that changed every 2 minutes. Claire sat on the steps, sunlight on her hair, eyes amused as she tried to keep up with the shifting penalties. Amelia arrived late, Oliver pink and drowsy in her arms. She lifted him a little, a question. I opened my arms, no big gestures, and took his warm weight. He smelled like milk and baby shampoo, and the future refusing to be bitter. "Hi, kid," I whispered. "You're safe." Across the lawn, Amelia caught my eye. We didn't look away. She mouthed, "Thank you," and I shook my head, because gratitude wasn't the shape of this. The shape was simpler and harder. It was decency. That night, I washed the lemonade glasses and thought about the way stories end. They don't. Not really. They change rooms. They shift house. They keep a couple of old photographs and let the rest pass back into paper. They plant something, cut it hard, and wait to see if it blooms again. Sometimes the truth is the only justice we get. But sometimes justice, quiet, unornamented, becomes mercy. And mercy becomes a life you can stand inside without stooping. I am not the man I was when I stood in a doorframe and watched my wife avoid my eyes in the mirror. I am the man who chose to learn the difference between kindness and permission, between trust and blindness, between punishment and boundaries. I am the man who believes that compassion does not excuse harm. It simply refuses to add to it. There's a photo on my mantle now. New wood. New apartment. Same hands. It's not a wedding photo. It's Oliver asleep on my chest. One tiny fist pressed under his chin. My shirt wrinkled from his weight. I didn't post it anywhere. I just look at it on mornings, when the world asks whether gentleness is worth the trouble. It is. It always is. And when I wake before dawn, the desert holding its breath, the way it does right before the sun decides to climb, I make coffee in the old mug, the one with the lightning bolt under patient we used to laugh about. And I think of peppermint and porch lights and the hot afternoon the roses decided to try again. Curiosity brought me to the edge. Tenderness carried me across. Compassion taught me how to live on the other side. If you liked this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.
If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.